I think it's important for the governments to understand entrepreneurs, but more importantly, entrepreneurs typically have a big struggle working with government, in implementing their various initiatives and schemes. So, since you have been on both sides, I wanted your perspective and your advice on how entrepreneurs can best deal with the government and how government can better understand, I'm thinking, with the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Well, I think, but I think this particular issue, where I think what you're referring to is that entrepreneurs really don't understand government, and let's just for a moment say governments don't understand entrepreneurs as well. I mean, how do you sort of bridge this gap? So let me give you sort of both sides of it. Is that on the governmental side, I think there's specifically what governments can do is to shape some of their policies and programs and make it much more hospitable to entrepreneurs. Because right now, but let me give you an example, that you look at any large state, or look at Michigan, California, since that's what we're talking about, and you look at how they purchase or acquire things. It's very much geared towards large enterprises. There's things called in-use requirements, that we will not buy a product unless at least 1 year, 2 years, 3 years into in the marketplace, and the process itself is so time consuming and so resource intensive that most entrepreneurs walk away because they don't have the patience or the resources, quite frankly, for that kind of stuff. So on the governmental side, I would say the kind of things governments can do is to say, you know what, we're going to take a small sliver of what we spent. Let me give you an example that California spends just in the IT alone roughly $3 billion a year. So in fact, just before I left, I was part of a task force that was looking at the economic development. And one of the things I was proposing is that why couldn't we take just a small sliver, not even 1%, maybe like 0.01%. I mean, just imagine 0.01% of $3 billion, still a large sum of money. And say, okay, we're going to reserve this for nurturing and providing startups, sort of seed, not seed capital, just a market. And yes, it comes with the risk that some of these startups may disappear. So obviously governments don't want to take taxpayers' money and put a lot of risk. But you can see that it completely puts a state government, a state like Michigan or California, in an entirely different role. So that's an example of what governments can do to really sort of make it feel like, okay, we are serious about it. Because when a governor goes overseas and says, okay, buy my products, we are really supporting large enterprises. I mean, not really supporting new entrepreneurial activity. Now, on the entrepreneur side, I think most entrepreneurs don't realize that governments are a wonderful market. In fact, some stage in their growth cycle, they have to deal with it. And rather than saying, okay, I have reached a certain point, now look at that market, maybe they ought to do the same thing and say, okay, I'm going to take a small slice of my marketing resources or my development resources, and I'm going to look at governments as a market. Because quite selfishly, from the entrepreneur standpoint, if they can break through, then it's a very, very lucrative market. That typically the margins tend to be higher. And the interesting part is that it's a very referenceable account. I mean, if you say, look, my product is now being used by state of Michigan, I mean, that opens doors in many, many other states, adjoining states. And also the fact that you don't have to fight as hard for your renewal cycle, for a continued growth. I often use the Indian metaphor of a mango tree. Once public sector markets are a little bit like mango trees. Once you plant the tree, it may take a little while to produce, but once it starts producing, it goes on for generations. So anyway, there's plenty of room on both sides to really come up with ideas and strategies that will really make that union much more productive for both parties.
Thank you, PK. Appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you, Mateen. Good to be here.